Hi, welcome back to the channel, and this week we're continuing where we left off last week, and that is with forest intros, and also with the exact same track and the exact same intro. So just for a recap, for those who didn't watch last week's video, essentially I used Ableton's grain delay to create this effect on the kick and bass. So it sounds quite good, but before I commit it to the track, I just want to try a different option. So I'm going to duplicate this track. Let's call this one grain. And then we'll mute that. And then on this one, let's call this stretch. Now we're just going to loop that section and then solo the kick and bass. We're also going to remove this grain delay because we don't need it. And we're also going to remove this utility because once again, we don't need that. So now we have just a standard, boring psytrance kick and bass. Now the first thing to do is ensure that your loop length is correct. So if I click on mine, you'll notice that it is a full 16 bars long. And in fact, I'm only using 8 of those because it stops here. So for my purposes, that is correct. And the reason why it's the right length is because I rendered this from Cubase from an existing track. However, if you are self-contained in Live or you only have a small loop, so let's say you only have a 1-bar loop, and then you duplicate it or stretch it as probably the case may be, then what's going to happen is when we do the next step, and jumping ahead here, we're about to modulate the warping mode. So if you duplicate this kick and bass, you're essentially going to duplicate or repeat that modulation, and that's going to become very boring very quickly. So grab your section and then do Ctrl-J to consolidate. Now you have a full, in this case, 8-bar loop. So basically that means you have a full 8 bars to do the modulation on rather than just a single bar. But as I said, I was happy with my initial 8-bar loop, so I'm just going to undo that. And also just to ensure that we're not doing any modulation in the extra regions or the unnecessary regions past the 8, let's right click and then we will do crop sample. So now we're confined to the 8-bar loop. So with that housekeeping out the way, let's play this back with the warp node set to beats, and there's no change. Let's now change it to texture, and there's still no change. But now if we duplicate the tempo, so now we're at 296 BPM, which is basically a doubling of 148. And then we play with the grain size. And then the pitch. We get these crazy artifacts. We can try doubling that again to 592. In fact, I think that sounds more like what I was aiming for. Now let's click on the envelope, and with any luck, we should see our 3 recently adjusted parameters. And indeed, we have transposition, which is pitch, obviously, grain size, and flux. So pitch down here, or transposition, like I said, grain size, and flux. So now let's get to work and draw some modulation in for those. But to ensure what we want for the modulation, let's do a bit of experimentation. So what do we like? So I think something like a rudimentary sine modulation would work on that. It's going to be hand-drawn, but the sine shape, if that makes sense. Let's play with flux. So I think that might work if we peak it around the middle and then drop it back down with maybe a little flurry or something towards the end of the 8 bars. But we'll see, we can always change that. And then pitch we'll come back to after we've done those two. I did say sine, but I'm going to draw it in so that ends up being a triangle essentially. Don't know what happened there, but let's fix that. I somehow inadvertently stretched it. Let's go to flux. Let's give it a bit more randomness if we like. And then the bits where it pitches up, like there, and there, which is caused because of the grain size, let's try and mitigate that, for want of a better term, using transposition. And mitigate's the wrong word, because if I wanted to truly mitigate, I would just change the modulation. But what I mean is kind of counter that effect. So let's see how this sounds. Let's go down just maybe 3. A little flourish at the end to kind of hint that we're dropping into the main kick and bass. Let's maybe make this come back about the middle. It's obviously one of those things you could play with for quite a while. And final one, let's leave the flux relatively high at the end. We'll leave 50% basically. So you very much get the impression now that it's ramping up towards the end. And let's just do just these 2 last bar or so. I'll solo the stretch kick and bass as well as the normal kick and bass and see how they flow into each other. I think that's working quite well. And let's do everything so we have full context. yeah, I think that's working quite well. From here, I will render both of those loops out and dump them in the project and then decide later which one I prefer. I might even use one for the intro and then one for the breakdown perhaps. So there we go. Thanks for watching. I hope that helps with your forest intros and breakdowns. I will see you next week. See you then. Bye.